What is up? Welcome to No Punt Intended, presented by Club Fantasy and friends. It is just about that time. We've made it through free agency. We have made it through the NFL draft. We've made it through weeks of talking about rookies and dynasty fantasy football. And it is finally time to talk about the 2024 redraft season. It is the Club Fantasy Look Inside series. Over the next 10 weeks, we are going to cover every NFL team, tell you some of our favorite fantasy players, maybe some of our least favorite fantasy players, and it all kicks off tonight with the Carolina Panthers, Washington Commanders, and Arizona Cardinals. Let's get into it. What is up? Welcome to No Punt Intended, presented by Club Fantasy. I am the host this week, Ryan Weisse. Joe Zolo took the week off, and we said, you know what? Our guest should take the week off as well. It is just me and Josh Hudson. Josh, how you doing tonight, my friend?
Oh, I'm doing great. Yeah, about 10 minutes ago, unfortunately, our scheduled guest had to cancel. Feeling a little under the weather, but that's okay because honestly, feels like a Monday morning again, right? You know, Monday's anxiety just coming in, just Ryan and I shooting the shit. I'm like, you know what? I'm all right with this.
I thought you were going to say that whenever you have to look at the Panthers, Commanders, and Cardinals on a single show, it's going to make anyone feel sick. So we completely understand what happened there. But no, our best
buddy. I don't really feel that way with this. Like
I do, which we'll talk about it a bit at the end of the show.
There's a little bit of intrigue with these three teams for me. It doesn't feel like a typical year when we're like, fuck, man, we got to talk about the three worst teams. Oh, this is going to drag. But
I think Houston gave us way too much hope last year. Like
maybe that's what it is.
Because we were so like down on that. We talked about Houston every year for 5 consecutive years or something. And now all of a sudden they're one of the best teams in the NFL. And so it's like, okay, now these teams, maybe they won't suck next year, except these ones I'm not a big fan of. But yeah, Josh, on Saturday, I went no guest with Austin. I thought it was one of our best episodes ever. Now that's a lot of weight on you to carry this episode of No Punt Intended.
That's scary. That's scary.
So folks,
but you know what? We got the vote of confidence from our favorite Zolo. So Lou, shout out, buddy. I appreciate you.
Hey, I have not seen Lou in the chat forever. Much better without his son.
I'm framing this picture. And
I was going to say, I feel like we all just strike a pose and shout out to the roll. Answer your emails, buddy. I'm trying to confirm you for Saturday. But thanks for jumping into the chat there, my friend. And if you are new to Club Fantasy, as so many of you are, because we have experienced great growth over the last few weeks, finally crossing 1,000 followers. Thank you to each and every one of you. The Look Inside series is where we will break down 3 teams every single week, except the last week, which will only be 2 teams. But we break down 3 teams every single week. We give you our favorite plays. We're actually going to dive into prop bets this year. It's going to be very cool. And it all coincides with articles that pop up on our website every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So as we jump into the very first team, Josh, we got the Carolina Panthers. So last season, the Panthers went 2-15, despite having the first pick of the draft, though that was all trades and fun like that. They did get a new coach, Dave Canales. They have a whole new offense, which is going to be Dave Canales' offense coming over from Tampa Bay, where he did work wonders with Baker Mayfield. And let's take a quick look at the projected starting offense for the Cardinals, Josh. At quarterback, they're going to have Bryce Young. At running back 1, it's likely going to be Jonathan Brooks. Running back 2, after what we saw last year, probably Chuba Hubbard. Diontae Johnson, Adam Thielen, and Xavier Legette are going to be the top 3 wide receivers. You do have Jonathan Mingo in there as the wide receiver 4. Why not?
He did have 83 targets last year, so I got to give him a little bit of props.
Those are all going to Legette. And then rookie tight end, Jatavian Sanders. A lot of new names here, Josh, but I think we need to start at the top. Bryce Young, do you see improvement heading into year 2?
I do, personally. I'm kind of excited to see what Bryce Young's going to bring to the table. I don't know that it's going to be very fantasy relevant just in terms of what he brings to the table, especially in a lot of your sort of standard redraft scoring settings. But if you are, playing in those super flex leagues, I think he can be a solid QB2. But I think more so what you're looking for is a solid second-year jump for Young that spreads the wealth among this offense. They went out when Canales came in, took over. Dan Morgan, former starting linebacker of the Carolina Panthers. Dan Morgan is now their general manager. Yeah, baby. Is now their general manager. They came in with a plan, and they said, we're going to protect Bryce Young. More to the point, we need to protect him up the middle. A quarterback that is only 5'10" needs to be able to step up and make throws. If you can't step up in a pocket when you're that short, can't see anything.
Yeah.
So he's going to be consistently on his back, throwing from his back foot, and it's going to lead to a lot more interceptions. I will give Bryce Young a ton of credit for as under pressure as he was last year. He only threw 11 picks.
Yeah.
Which that tells me that he makes some pretty solid decisions, right? That he's not just throwing the ball anywhere and everywhere and is trying to get the ball into the hands of his playmakers. The previously mentioned Jonathan Mingo had 83 targets last year. Okay, great. They were very empty. I don't even think it was a 50% catch rate. This year, they bring in someone like Diontae Johnson for all of the drops talk and everything else. It's volume-based, right? He has 140 targets every year. So I'm less concerned with the amount of drops and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
But Diontae Johnson's going to catch 60 to 62% of his passes. They brought in two very high-priced guards to protect Bryce Young. They have Taylor Moton. They have a new offensive system. You draft a running back. You draft a wide receiver. You draft a tight end. This is going to be an offense that has a lot of hiccups, but this is a former number 1 overall pick. He has talent, right?
Yeah.
He can do the things that they need him to do. He just needs a good system. And this system over the last 2 years, in 2022 in Seattle, 2023 in Tampa, has yielded very positive results with quarterbacks that were on their way out. I have a lot of faith in Bryce Young to be able to not only get the ball to Diontae Johnson, but at least open this offense up to where it can be productive for fantasy managers.
I have to quickly jump in here before I talk about Bryce Young. Caesar, we did it. We did it last week. We hit that 1,000 follower. And then my guy, you are the first super chat that does not work for us. So thank you. We will put that money to great use. Thank you so much, Caesar. We see you out here. And like I said, we love you guys. This has been all a great journey so far. And we very, very much appreciate it. Josh, you hit on all the things that I've read your article. I know how you feel about Bryce Young because you talked about a lot of this during your Diontae Johnson article. One of the things you didn't hit on was he did not have a lot of interceptions. He also didn't have a lot of touchdowns. And that is something
11 touchdowns.
I have to see a lot of improvement from. We knew he wasn't a big runner of the football, but to be honest, 40 carries for 253 yards. I remember back when Gardner Minshew was a rookie, because of course I do. And there was this whole hype around quarterbacks who hit 300 rushing yards tend to finish in like the top 15 in fantasy football. He's on a pace to be able to do that if he runs the ball a few more times. But more importantly, as you noted, 11 touchdowns, but they have improved in so many different areas. And then the improvement we saw from Dave Canales with first Geno Smith. Everyone likes to point to Baker Mayfield, but he did it with Geno Smith in Seattle first. And then he comes and does it with Baker Mayfield. It's hard not to look at this guy and think that he's not going to be able to step in and fix whatever is ailing Bryce Young. And Bryce Young, while a slight and small guy, we've seen talent from him on the field. It's just time to see it all get put together. And the big thing is he was throwing to fucking Adam Thielen as his number 1 wide receiver last year. Now you have Diontae Johnson. You have this Xavier Legette. I'm not a great film grinder, but one of the comps people wanted to give Legette was Deebo Samuel. And that's because they both went to the same school, this, that, and the other. When I watched it, it immediately screamed Brandon Ayuk to me. And I'm not saying Legette is going to be as good as Ayuk, but I'm not saying he's not going to be either. And if this offense can run like the offenses we've seen over the last 2 years in Tampa Bay and Seattle, I do think it is going to be a highly improved offense, Josh.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I look at this offense. What you're looking for is the top 2 targets, right? Dave Canales from Seattle, Tampa Bay. You have 2 guys that are sitting at or higher than 20% target share. So then it becomes, which of these guys profile into those specific buckets, right? Legette is the bigger player. He's 6'1", but he is 220, right? So ideally, he's likely going to be in that Evans DK role. And then you have Diontae, who's about 5'10", 183 on a good week. Obviously going to play that sort of smaller side, which is like more of the Lockett and Chris Godwin role.
Yeah.
When Metcalf first went to Seattle, he didn't immediately lead the team in targets. That was Tyler Lockett, right?
Tyler Lockett held
but
that
by
role.
year 2, things kind of started to swing a little bit, right? I don't see it an issue with that same exact logic happening here, where Diontae Johnson comes in, dominates the targets in that 23 to 25% target share range, and Legette slowly starts to work his way up. I think really I guess the time frame is going to be probably the first 8 weeks or so is likely going to be Adam Thielen in more that wide receiver 2 role. And then they're going to realize, damn, this guy's 34 years old. He's old. He's slow. Let's maybe get the rookie involved, right? And then you're going to start to see that progression with the rookie. Logically speaking, that makes sense. Does it always happen? No, because we don't know how much of this playbook Legette is going to be able to swallow and consume that quickly. So that's why, like, when I did my projections, and Ryan, I'm very curious to see how you had sort of the target share breakdown amongst these wide receivers. Like, I did it more of I have Johnson roughly 25%, and then I have Legette at about 17 and Thielen right around 15%.
Yeah. First of all, I almost DM'd you right after I read your article. We picked the exact same number of passing targets for them. We both have them at 569 targets, which
probably means that their
way under or way
their stat lines are the same exact, because I didn't really go through and tweak too much of the yards per reception, the catch percentage, any of that. I wanted to get everything done, and then I was going to go back through and kind of tweak everything from there.
So I have Diontae at 27% target share, both the other guys floating at around 60%.
So you went even higher on Diontae.
I did. I think they're going to lean on Diontae Johnson first year. I think he is heads and tails the best wide receiver in this offense. I don't think Dave Canales is dumb. I think he's going to use him in a Chris Godwin role. Chris Godwin was around 140 targets last season.
133 targets last year, I believe.
So I think that's the role. Speaking of Diontae Johnson, and Josh, this could be a short segment. You wrote the article. You wrote the autobiography of Diontae Johnson over the last 4 seasons. I don't know that I'm going to have much to add, but why don't you go ahead and talk to people about Diontae Johnson?
Yeah, when Diontae decides to write a memoir, I need to be his first phone call. Yeah. But no, so like the thing that obviously Diontae's greatest strength is his separation, right? And I've talked about this numerous times, not just on this particular show, but literally every single show that I've ever appeared on. Young quarterbacks need targets that separate. They need players that know how to get open, because they are not looking to throw the football without any level of anticipation, right? So many of these offenses now aren't built on timing the way that like Miami is, for instance, right? Like they need to see their guy open before they're throwing the football. And when you don't have wide receivers that can separate, because let's be real here, Jonathan Mingo was very unpolished heading into the league last year, and it showed when he actually 100%. Saw targets. Adam Thielen at 33 years old, he's not separating very well. Yeah. He's got really good hands, but he's not separating very well. So that right there puts your young quarterback at a disadvantage. Diontae Johnson is one of the best route runners and separators in the NFL. That right there is going to exponentially improve Bryce Young's stock, because he can better anticipate when to make throws. Getting those 2 guards in the center there also helps his cause. But all Diontae Johnson has to do is just turn the corner and he's open, because he separates with the best of them. They don't play a ton of great corners in the NFC South. No. Right? AJ Terrell, I would think, is probably going to be the best one. And even he's kind of been hit or miss of late. He makes tackles. He gives up a lot of plays.
And also, depending on how they decide to run their offense, Legette may see Terrell on the outside, to where if they move Diontae inside, Terrell doesn't travel. So
exactly. So there's a lot of things that I think Diontae Johnson can bring, moving from inside outside the same way that Chris Godwin could. I think the biggest difference between those two is that we've always known that Chris Godwin runs better out of the slot. Like, he wasn't great last year when they moved him more so to the outside. Diontae's always been a boundary wide receiver.
Yep.
So I think that in and of itself is going to improve Bryce Young's stock and ability to throw the football.
Well, especially with the way Diontae plays and these new improvements on the offensive line, I think you're going to see a lot more bootlegs. And that could also play very well for Jatavian Sanders and whichever running back is playing, likely Jonathan Brooks, because Bryce Young isn't going to be a tuck and run. So if Diontae's not open, he's going to hit those coinciding underneath routes, which are likely to be JT Sanders and Jonathan Brooks. So the Texas rookies could be looking really good in this offense. But Josh, let's finish this thing up with one other rookie talking. And let's start off with, let's finish the Panthers up with Xavier Legette. And I'm actually going to get you started here. Like I said, when I was watching his film, he needs growth. There's a lot of room for Legette to grow. But I did not get Deebo Samuel vibes. I got Brandon Ayuk vibes. Now, there's not a whole big difference between Deebo Samuel vibes and Brandon Ayuk vibes. Brandon Ayuk, one of the first things they talked about when he was drafted was how great of a kick returner they thought he was going to be for the NFL. That's something that he could step into Carolina, and that matters this year. With the new kickoff rules, where it is basically a run play where all your guards are lined up in front of you, you could see Legette have value as a kick returner to get started while he's learning the wide receiver position. But I agree with you. They're going to start this thing with Adam Thielen. They're going to find really quick in their offense of 23-year-olds, 34 Adam Thielen doesn't really fit the vibe of what they're going for. I don't know how much he has left in the tank. We've been literally burying Adam Thielen for 5 seasons now. So I don't know how much more we're going to see from Thielen. So I think Legette is a guy, and we preach this every year. First of all, be cautious about drafting rookies. If his ADP creeps into the single digits, don't touch him. But wait for the guy to drop him, because they're going to drop him in the first 3 weeks, because you have to have patience when it comes to these rookies. But Josh, I'm real interested. I didn't see a ton of him doing kick returns at South Carolina because he was their number 1 wide receiver, but I think that's a role he could step into right away for the Carolina Panthers.
Yeah, I remember when we had John Lobb on. He mentioned the kick return side of things. I mean, in the last 2 years at South Carolina, he had 25 kickoff returns. He did have 1 return for a touchdown in 2022. So I don't think that's out of the realm of possibility for him to at least get his start doing that. But when you spend a first-round pick on a wide receiver, the first thing through your mind is not, oh, I need this guy returning kicks, right? They're not the Pittsburgh Steelers trying to throw Justin Fields out there. So, but what I love about the idea of Legette is he had almost a 50% contested catch rate last year.
Yeah.
And that's getting peppered with targets. He only had 2 drops with over 97 targets at South Carolina. So again, these are qualities that a young quarterback needs. If you're going up and getting the football and you have a set of hands that you're not just like, batting passes away or, oh, this hits my hand and then falls into the defender's hands. Like, a young quarterback needs to be able to develop trust there, right? So if you're going up, you're getting the football, you're bringing it down, that's what's going to lend Bryce Young to say, all right, that's my guy. I know I can trust him. It can throw it in tight spots. He's going to come down with that football, right?
You saw that with Adam Thielen last year. Adam Thielen was the receiver he was in fantasy based on volume. It was not
exactly.
You weren't watching Adam Thielen play and be like, damn, he's beating Father Time. No, you were watching Adam Thielen saying, who else was he going to throw to? It needed to be Thielen.
Yeah, I mean, he's averaged like just last year over 3 yards per route run, over 6 yards after the catch per reception. That's what Legette brings to the table, right?
Yeah.
Same thing with Diontae Johnson. Diontae Johnson actually has a better career yak average than Chris Godwin. So these are all things that balance themselves within this Dave Canales system. Canales went out and got the guys that are going to fit with what he wants to do. That's what's going to make not only this offense tick, it's going to make Legette better. I mean, right now on Underdog Drafts, as of this day, May 22nd, he's going wide receiver 68. That is a steal in best ball drafts, right? Like, I know that Austin's been on a couple best ball episodes, Saturday with Mock It Like It's Hot, Tuesday night on Masterclass with Stacy and Jay. And we talk about correlation, right? Who did the Panthers play week 17? Like, this is a type of correlation lineup where you could bring in Bryce Young, Legette, Johnson, all at extreme values in best ball drafts. And they're cheap dart throws. Like, I understand, they're probably not going to be the most sought after, and I get that, but there's value to be had there if this offense clicks the way that we saw. I mean, how often did we doubt the Tampa Bay offense heading into last year?
Yeah.
So many in this community buried Mike Evans because they said, Baker ain't it. Dave Canales, who the hell is that? Look at the season that Bucs offense had.
Amazing.
So I'm not ready to roll over on this Panthers offense, I'm tempering some expectations. I don't think they're going to be a 10-win team and win the South or anything, but they only won 2 games last year. I mean, the signs are all pointing up, right?
Yeah,
Even if
really
it's
are.
4 wins, like they're going to be a better offense. So
yeah. And you mentioned you're not going to bet on them to win the South. And this is a new thing we've added to the show this season. And that is going to be our favorite bets for the Carolina Panthers. And we each picked one. Robbie dropped his in here. Me and Robbie's are about the same player. So Robbie works for Underdog. So he went with Underdog and he took their spicy pick. Diontae Johnson over 4.5 receiving touchdowns. And I stuck with it with Diontae Johnson over 825.5 receiving yards. And that number, Josh, felt insanely low to me. And you touched on this in your article where you had Johnson getting fewer targets than me, but you had him getting more yards than me. I think you projected that if everything went well, he could hit 11. I have him at 1060 and the over under is 825 right now. Like,
yeah, I have him at 1075 in mine. I mean, like I said, in that article that I wrote, there's a lot of comparisons to 2022 Lockett, 2023 Chris Godwin. That's essentially the role that Diontae Johnson is going to play in this Dave Canales offense here in Carolina. Each of those years, Lockett, 12.3 yards per reception. Chris Godwin last year, 12.3 yards per reception. Last year, Diontae Johnson set a career high in yards per reception at 14.1. That was after Matt Canada got fired and the Pittsburgh Steelers actually started throwing the football downfield.
Yeah.
So if you're telling me that an offensive coordinator comes in and says, you know what, my guy's got some speed, maybe we should let him like get the ball in space, right? We know how good he can separate. We know how good of a target earner Diontae Johnson is because that's all he's done over his entire career is earn over a 20% target share. You tell me why he can't hit over 12 yards per reception in this offense. This should be such an easy smash on the higher. Like 825.5, that's going to slowly work its way a lot closer to 900 by the start of the season.
I agree. I need to go look at some of these numbers as they come out. I did want to give a quick disclaimer. Not a lot of prop bets out there in the world right now. For each team on Underdog, there's like 1 or 2 players. On FanDuel, it's almost all rookies and a running back here and there. So temper your expectations for our prop bets for at least the first 2 episodes. I think things will get a lot better come June when bookmakers have time to decide what they want to do. Huge shout out to our friends over at South Harmon. Always glad to see you guys in the chat. And Josh, I really liked your last bet you put out there for the Panthers. I'll let you introduce it and then I'll give some thoughts.
Yeah, so over on DraftKings Sportsbook, you can obviously make bets for different awards and things like that. I found this one really interesting because we know the Panthers drafted a lot of rookies. Their first 3 picks, all offensive rookies. Jatavian Sanders in the 3rd round, running back Jonathan Brooks in the 2nd, and of course, wide receiver Xavier Legette in the 1st. Xavier Legette is plus 4,500 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year, which, again, I mean, you know, he is a first-round wide receiver. We know the guys that went top 10, Adunze, Neighbors, obviously Marvin Harrison Jr. A lot of those guys are going to earn probably even more targets than Xavier Legette. But I think my favorite one out of this, the first running back taken in this draft, Jonathan Brooks, plus 5,000 to win Offensive Rookie of the Year. Quarterbacks are always going to be favored. We know what type of situation Caleb Williams lands in. Obviously, Jaden Daniels, who we'll get to here in a little bit. There's all kinds of things that are saying don't make any of these bets. Look at what happened a couple years ago with the Jets when they had Breece Hall, Garrett Wilson. Both of those guys, if healthy, likely would have finished 1-2 in the Offensive Rookie of the Year voting. Garrett Wilson ended up winning it, right? Who's to say that these guys can't come out guns blazing, light up the scoreboard, and these quarterbacks underwhelm? I think plus 5,000 on Jonathan Brooks isn't the worst bet in the world.
I like it. And I looked at that bet and immediately was like, you know, you said, obviously you can't guarantee these are going to win. At plus 5,000, a $1 bet pays you $50. I'll take those odds all day. And I love what you said about Brooks. First running back off the board on a team that's going to need to run the ball. It just makes a lot of sense. And now we're going to move on to the Washington Commanders. And Josh, it was a bit of a rough season last year for the Commanders as well. For a while, it looked like Sam Howell might be the truth, but then it very clearly looked like he wasn't the truth. And then they traded him away to upgrade at quarterback in the draft. Last year, they go 4-13, which led to a new head coach. Dan Quinn comes over from the rival Dallas Cowboys. He's been running that defense over there. He will now run the Washington Commanders. And he brings in Cliff Kingsbury out of Thailand or wherever the hell he was staying after he left the Arizona Cardinals. He was their head coach from 19 to 22. He is now going to run the offense in Washington. And it's a new look offense at most positions. Jaden Daniels, the rookie out of LSU, is going to be the starting quarterback. It's probably a 1A, 1B situation at running back with Brian Robinson returning, but Austin Ekeler, who was a commodity 2 years ago, and now he's kind of limping in with the Washington Commanders. Terry McLaurin is still there. He's still the wide receiver 1, though. Jahan Dotson, a couple of guys on Twitter called us out today for calling McLaurin the wide receiver 1. They think Jahan Dotson has that role. Luke McCaffrey, Christian's brother, went a little bit higher in the draft than at least I expected. Finds himself in a nice spot where he could be the wide receiver 3, De'Ami Brown at wide receiver 4. Zach Ertz comes out of retirement, plays like 4 games in Detroit, and now he's the starting tight end in Washington. And they also spent a pick on a rookie tight end, Ben Sanat. So Josh, when we look at these players, I'm actually going to have you get started on Austin Ekeler, because I feel like Eckler's a guy who's been very polarizing in the fantasy community this season. We don't know exactly what we're going to get after what turned out to be a rough 2023, not just for Ekeler, but for the entire Cardinals team, or Chargers team, rather.
Yeah, I think Ekeler definitely got the short end of the stick with a lot of the offensive line issues that they suffered. But it was also a very different offense, right? Like Joe Lombardi, coming in those 2 years in 2021 and 2022, Austin Ekeler scored just between those 2 years, scored 30 red zone touchdowns on the ground. Like stupid numbers. Last year, he scored 5. So and again, that coincides with a scheme change. So maybe, sure, Austin Ekeler a year older. All right, fine, whatever. Body not built for the heavy wear and tear red zone work. Sure, whatever. I'm going to say that maybe the scheme is the fault here, because it worked pretty well in New Orleans when Lombardi was there with Sean Payton and Alvin Kamara. Comes over, does pretty well with Austin Ekeler in Los Angeles. Homeboy leaves, and now they can't score touchdowns in the red zone. So, yeah. You can take it for what you will. But to me, there's no defined wide receiver 3 on this team. There's no third target, right? The Cliff Kingsbury system has always spread the football around really well. Yep. I'll get to some of these points a little bit later with Terry McLaurin, but only once has a pass catcher on a Cliff Kingsbury offense, which again really is only 4 years in the NFL, 2019 to 2022. Only once has they ever topped a 20% target share. And that was the first year of DeAndre Hopkins, right? So say what you want about Terry McLaurin. I think he's a defined wide receiver 1. But that leaves so many other targets for guys like Jahan Dotson, the ghost of Zach Ertz. Maybe Ben Sanat comes out and starts to do things. Maybe Luke McCaffrey is a huge surprise. Why wouldn't they go to Austin Ekeler, right? Like, that just makes too much sense for Austin Ekeler to come in and have a 14% target share in this offense. The biggest cause for pause for me, and I want to bring up Mike's comment here from South Harmon, where he's like, Jaden Daniels to the moon. I'm not opposed to this at all, because Jaden Daniels has the moon in front of him because of his legs and what he can do, not only as a runner, but he did pretty well as a passer last year en route to a Heisman Trophy. Mobile quarterbacks don't tend to target running backs very often. That would be my only worry here with Austin Ekeler. But the thought that there's no third target, no defined third target, the red zone work is completely up for grabs, because when we start talking about Brian Robinson, you'll see why it makes all the sense in the world for Austin Ekeler. There's RB2 upside here with Austin Ekeler in this offense.
Yeah, I also want to throw South Harmon up on the screen for $20. Thank you, guys. We appreciate it. But Josh, one thing you brought up was, mobile quarterbacks don't tend to throw to the running back. When I do our projection sheets, I go look at the offensive coordinators' last 2 years of running their offense. And the thing that struck me is the Kingsbury offense did go over 100 targets to each of the running backs, but never went over 17.5%. to the running back. So I don't know if they're going to throw as much with Jaden Daniels as they did with Kyler Murray. So there are 100 targets probably up for grabs, and there's no denying Brian Robinson showed out as a receiver last year. He really did. But Austin Ekeler is a better receiver. So you have
to. And that's my thing with Brian Robinson. Like, I like Brian Robinson. I think he's good at a lot of things, but very much like Damian Harris, he's not great at any one thing.
Yep.
Like, he's good. He's serviceable, but that's it. And so, like, to kind of see where his ADP is right now, he's going RB33, I believe, on Underdog, where Ekeler is about RB31. That makes all the sense in the world to me. Is Brian Robinson going to outperform that? 100%. 100%. Yeah. But I don't think that he has near the upside that Austin Ekeler has because of the tools that Austin Ekeler possesses.
I'm just going to have you keep talking about Robinson. He was the next guy anyway, so we kind of already got started here. So let's just keep going in because I know you had some points you wanted to make about him. Last year, I kind of brought up, you expected to see more out of Antonio Gibson in the passing game, but Robinson had 4 receiving touchdowns. I watched most of those because I live off of Red Zone. 2 of them were like very fluky, like you can't expect a repeat, but still that's 2 more touchdowns than you would have expected him to have with Antonio Gibson. Now you have Austin Ekeler, who's just a better Antonio Gibson, though older.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking at this mostly just from a rushing perspective, right? So over those 4 years when Kingsbury was in Arizona, they combined for 18 touchdowns in 2019, which was tied for 7th in the NFL. 22 rushing touchdowns in 2020, 4th in the NFL. 23 rushing touchdowns in 2021, tied for 3rd. And then, of course, the big step back in 2022, they were tied for 15th with 15 touchdowns. Probably what led to Cliff Kingsbury getting fired.
And Washington,
if there's one thing,
Washington only had 14 last year. So
so that tells me, why did they bring in Austin Ekeler? Because he scored 30 rushing touchdowns in the red zone over 2021 and 2022. Brian Robinson, in his 2 seasons with the Commanders in 2022, he had only 23 attempts inside the 20, which was 2 fewer than Antonio Gibson. He scored all of 2 touchdowns. Both of them were inside the 5. Last year, he had 26 rush attempts inside the red zone. Gibson only had 8. Those 26 led to only 5 touchdowns, 2 of them inside the 5. Okay. So if you're telling me that an offensive coordinator that loves to call running plays right up the gut inside the 5-yard line is going to give the football to somebody who doesn't have a great success rate in the red zone versus one that does, which way are you leaning?
Well, especially
Ekeler.
Well, you also factor in Jaden Daniels, who is going to be a weapon in the red zone. You're going to see an offense where they're going to bootleg Jaden Daniels and run Austin Ekeler right around the goal line on a flat route. And Daniels is either going to tuck and run inside if the corner commits to the outside on Ekeler or the linebacker, or Daniels is going to take it to the sideline, or Eckler's just going to burn the guy to the side and he's going to dump it in there. No, Mike, not Chris Rodriguez to the moon. No. Let's stick with Jaden Daniels. I think he is the benefactor in this situation. But yeah, Josh, the poor red zone showing could be interesting. And then also interesting, every year it's a debate. Is this the year that Terry McLaurin is a wide receiver 1 in fantasy football? I joked a few years ago, he is a perpetual wide receiver 20 candidate. That is who he is as a person. R. Renee just dropped an article on him today. She has very high hopes, and it's all about the improvement at quarterback. Josh, how do you feel? And again, we had someone immediately call us out on Twitter and say Jahan Dotson's the wide receiver 1.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at his target shares over the last 4 years, 22.3% in 2020, 23.64% in 2021.
This is down. Terry McLaurin, right?
Yeah, it's gone down every year since then. 21.7 in 2022 and then 20.75 in 2023. Now, obviously last year they utilized all 3 of their guys, McLaurin, Dotson, and Curtis Samuel. All of them right across the board did very well, but no one of them really shined out and said, hey, that's my guy. Now, again, you come in, you look at it this year, Curtis Samuel's gone. You're replacing him with essentially a project at wide receiver 3 at Luke McCaffrey. You bring in someone like an Austin Ekeler, brand new quarterback. Is he going to hyper target a wide receiver 1 just out of comfortability and familiarity? Is this kind of like shades of, oh my God, Cliff Kingsbury, I finally got a wide receiver 1 again. 28% target share. Let's go. Like, is that going to be the situation? I don't know. Is Jahan Dotson even for real? Like, he started to pop a little his rookie year.
Little out of him.
Huge step back last year, in my opinion. Like, is the third year breakout a real thing for him? Like, there are so many unknowns when it comes to this passing attack for Washington that I almost like when I did my projections, I leaned into the familiarity. And for me, that was Terry McLaurin. I didn't go as high as 28%, but I did about 26%. That still got him to 140 targets. But he's never been a huge touchdown earner, right?
Yeah.
And most rookie quarterbacks, when they come in, they're not slinging 30 touchdowns.
So that's what I was going to say.
They're a lot closer to 20 than they are 30.
Mike brings up, they had Sam Howell throwing the football all over the field, and Terry McLaurin couldn't make the dream come true.
Exactly. So it makes me nervous just from that standpoint. But as I mentioned, he's only like in a Cliff Kingsbury system, only one wide receiver has ever topped 20% target share. That being said, there have been 4 different instances where a wide receiver has topped over 8 targets per game.
Yeah.
Okay. So I do think that Terry McLaurin is in line for more than 8 targets in a game, especially when you look at what's behind him. So I think that there at least lies the potential for that type of, all right, maybe he can at least finish as wide receiver 15. I don't know that the ceiling is going to be there for like a top 10 finish, but I think that largely falls on how many touchdowns do we realistically expect Terry McLaurin to receive. I only have him at 5.
So
I'm curious what you have with that, Ryan.
I have him at 6 touchdowns. However, let's start with something people need to be aware of. I overproject, and it takes me a long time to get people back down to normal. Wide receiver is the hardest, Josh. Everybody's fucking good at wide receiver. You know I bitch about this every year. So I'm going to tell you his stat line before I tell you what that ranks for me. Because
see, what I try to look at, I look at where do you have him at fantasy points, total fantasy points? Where would that have ranked last year? Because again, when you're doing projections, you're thinking that everybody's healthy.
Yeah. Let's see here. Give me 1 second. So looking at McLaurin, I have him about what he did last year. 79 catches, 1,000, and 4 touchdowns is what he had last year. I have him at 78, 1,000, and 6 touchdowns. So I legit in PPR have him at 12 more points than what he had last year. However, last year, that was good for... Where's Terry McLaurin? Always in the 20s. Oh, did he not even make the 20s last year?
28.
Wide receiver 28. It falls to 35 for me right now. Now, obviously, with receivers, I don't project injuries. The only thing I'm projecting with wide receivers is I bumped Rashee Rice down because that man is missing multiple games, plain and simple. So I bumped him down in targets compared to where he should be, which could put him ahead of McLaurin. So I have him in the 30s right now. I'm not a big believer. I'm kind of with Mike on this. I think the dream might be over. I will say your stats about the 20% target share. I only have him at 23% targets right now.
Okay.
But again, I have their passing way down just because it's a rushing quarterback, and I think they're going to lean on that.
What do you have for total pass attempts for Washington?
That would be 575.
So I have him even less than that. I have him at 539.
So how many total targets? Because you said you had his percentage up.
Yeah, I have his percentage at 25.97, and I have him at 140 targets.
Okay, I have him at 133. So we're about the same.
Yeah, something that I've kind of been doing with my projections, because so few quarterbacks are actually playing all 17 games.
Yep.
I only project the quarterbacks at 16 games.
I do with most, unless I know they're a guy who plays week 17.
Yeah, so I have Jaden Daniels at about 507 pass attempts total, which, considering what he was able to do in college, like, yes, we know he will run the football and what he can do.
I promise you, Josh, that's exactly what he's at in my projections, 507. So this is getting weird.
Hilarious. That's funny. But yeah, I mean, I only have him at 8, or I only have the team at 19 total passing touchdowns. Because again, I don't really, rookie quarterbacks, they're a lot closer to 20 than they are 30 for me.
Yeah.
So
Nope, I think that's fair. And then when we get into the rookie quarterbacks, it actually plays perfectly into our favorite bets when it comes to this team. And again, the bets are limited, and thankfully we do like rookie quarterbacks because the bets for this team specifically, Jaden Daniels is one of the biggest ones. So Robbie took him as higher than 19.5 passing touchdowns on Underdog. I feel like I need to throw out there that Robbie is a Commanders fan. I actually had Robbie on a show a few weeks ago, and he literally thinks the Commanders could make the playoffs. He is all in on Jaden Daniels. I don't know that I agree with the higher. When I look at my projections, Josh, I have him at 19 exactly. I wouldn't touch that bet if my life depended on it. However, Jaden Daniels at 500.5 rushing yards. I have this man over 700, Josh. Where do you have him?
Yeah, I have him at, I believe, 638 rushing on 116 attempts, which honestly, I think 116 attempts might be low. So
I have him at 133. So you're basically where I am. It's just you don't have the attempts in that I have. So yeah, smash that higher. And then Josh, you made me laugh, especially for a bet that we're going to talk about in the next one. But I'll let you talk a little bit about your favorite bet that you found on the Washington Commanders.
Plus 750 to win the division. So look, and you see, I'm an Eagles fan, right? But I'm a pretty realistic Eagles fan here. Kellen Moore going to Los Angeles with the Chargers. We all got pretty hyped. We got excited. Great quarterback, great situation. He's going to come in, light up the world. They obviously fell flat on their face. Justin Herbert only played 12 games. All bets are off in Philly, right? Sky's the limit. Bring in Saquon Barkley. Offense is a juggernaut. Everything's going their way. How many times have we seen the wheels fall off?
Enough.
Everybody's doubting Dallas right now, right?
Yeah, I think back to the
wheels could very easily fall off on Dallas. The Giants, they need about 18 Hail Marys to go, and it still ain't going to work for them. They're a really sneaky bet for me to win the division. You got a new head coach. Obviously, the new ownership group is excited. If Jaden Daniels comes in and plays really freaking well,
yeah,
the defensive-minded head coach, he brought in a lot of good pieces. They had a lot of high draft picks. If they hit on a lot of these early draft picks, like this feels like a very winnable bet, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I hate saying it because I'm not a Commanders fan, but this feels like a winning bet here because there's very rarely a repeat winner of the division in the NFC East. So I think right there you can rule out Dallas. Philly becomes the most logical point here.
Yeah.
But even last year, like going in, a lot of people were saying, look, Washington has a shot here. If Sam Howell can actually play well, they could be in a position to win some football games. Obviously, he didn't play well, so there went that idea. But this is a different team. It's a different scheme, different offense, different defense, different coaching staff, ownership, all these things. They cleaned the slate. They brought in a lot of really good pieces, and they still have some existing really good pieces. So I'm not saying it's going to happen. I certainly don't want it to happen, but I don't think it's a bad bet.
For me, I would need to see another 0 at the end of that before I'm betting on Washington to win the division. And now we're going to move on to the Arizona Cardinals. And Josh, originally this was going to be the Patriots, but Joe got very angry with you towards the end of the show last week when I announced the Patriots, and he said, no, it's not happening. So you went ahead and threw the Arizona Cardinals in here so that Joe could talk about his beloved Patriots next week. Last season, 4-13, same record as the Washington Commanders. They brought their coach back, Jonathan Gannon. Obviously, they just signed him last year. Drew Pensig is going to run the offense. Similar scheme to what we saw from Kevin Stefanski in Cleveland. And so very similar to what we probably saw from Arizona last year, though you hope to see more of Kyler Murray. Starting quarterback is going to be Kyler Murray. Running back, it's likely going to be a 1-2 situation because it's always been that. James Conner's the one. Rookie Trey Benson is the 2. James Conner does not play every game of the season. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later. Marvin Harrison Jr. is going to be the wide receiver 1, and then there is not much else. You have Michael Wilson at 2. Zay Jones just recently signed at 3. Greg Dortch has been their wide receiver 4 seemingly forever. However, they have a stud at tight end. It took him a season to develop, but we saw the best out of Trey McBride last season. And Josh, let's go ahead and start with the tight end. Let's talk about Trey McBride. I am seeing from a lot of people smarter than me, Trey McBride as their number 1 fantasy tight end heading into this season.
Number 1 is interesting. I don't know that I have him that high. I have him right now projected at 84 receptions, 844 yards, 5 touchdowns, which, I mean, that's pushing 200 fantasy points. So he's definitely more than likely going to end up in my top 4, I would say. But the one thing that I love about this is this scheme is derived from Stefanski's time in Cleveland, right? So when you look at last year in Arizona and then the 3 previous years in Cleveland, and we'll start in the year 2020, the tight end target share in these offenses, 27.7, 27.3, 24.6. And then last year, Arizona targeted the tight end position 32.25% of the time. Now, granted, they didn't have a legitimate wide receiver 1 last year, which kind of inflates that. You now have a legitimate wide receiver 1 in Marvin Harrison Jr. But this kind of goes to my point here. This Cleveland system works between the wide receiver 1 and the tight end 1.
Yep.
Trey McBride is the tight end 1, and it's not close. So if they're going to approach, let's say, a 27% target share, you might be looking at about 25% going to Trey McBride, while Marvin Harrison kind of gets up to speed. We'll say I think he's probably the most pro-ready player in this draft. But there's just so much to like here because Kyler obviously now becomes 2 years removed from the ACL, should be back in full swing, a year into this system where he can sort of get comfortable. They've made some improvements along the offensive line. You bring in Jonah Williams to man the right side. You move Paris Johnson back to his more natural left tackle side. They've got the pieces there in front of Kyler to protect him. Give him time now to find his weapons. He spent all of the back half of last year developing a rapport with Trey McBride. So who do you think he's looking to first?
100%.
It's going to be Trey McBride. Yep. Like I have McBride right now at 114 targets, and that feels low.
Yeah.
I don't often say that about a tight end. So
I have him at 124, but that's still below Marvin Harrison. I think Marvin Harrison is about to step in here and take the world by storm. I have him at 149. So
yeah, I have Marvin Harrison at 137. I have him at a 24% target share. So yeah, I mean, I'm right there with you. This system is it's inside out. It's inside for McBride. It's outside for Marvin Harrison. So if you want pieces of this offense, it's Trey McBride, almost right there at the top for me. So I
want to see where his ADP ends up because one of the things I noticed
right now he's tight end 3.
I mean round. Do you know what round that's falling?
I believe it was the 5th round last time I checked.
I'm okay with that because one of the things I noticed when doing my projections this year, everybody knows I am the biggest advocate for Travis Kelce on the face of the planet. One of the things I noticed is I have the tight ends way closer. We saw Travis Kelce take that obvious step back last season. I have Trey McBride taking a step up. Kelce's still my tight end 1. McBride is still my tight end 2, but they are like a 1 point per game difference, if that, half a point per game. I am very much in on Trey McBride. So if the cost is right, I'm there. The issue is if he's tight end 3 going in the 5th round, I imagine Laporta's tight end 2. That means I can.
Laporta right now is tight end 1 on underdog at the 3.9.
So Kelce's 2 or
Kelce's 2 at the 4.4.
My point still stands though. I can wait and get Mark Andrews. I can wait and get Evan Ingram. I don't know that I'm paying up for a tight end this year, even though I am in love with Trey McBride. Straight up love this kid, Josh. I remember rookie drafts 2 years ago where nobody really wanted him because he didn't go until the 3rd round of the NFL draft. And I'm like, he's still the first tight end taken. And we loved this kid in college. So I bought up all the Trey McBride. And Josh, as you're fully aware, I already had all the Travis Kelce. So now I just have a plethora of riches at tight end. There's one league where I have Kelce, Laporta, and Trey McBride. I should be trading these people away, but I kind of just want to laugh at all of my league mates when they get 6 points out of their tight end. And I have 40 on my bench every single week because they just kept letting me get these guys and they're idiots. But regardless, I agree. McBride is this offense, and we actually don't have Harrison as a guy we're going to talk about, but that's because that's all we've talked about for the last month. I want to move to oh shit, Crispy telling me to stun on him. I want to move to quarterback, Josh, because I have a conundrum. The hype around Kyler Murray and one other quarterback, Anthony Richardson, that we'll talk about later. I'm not bought in. I don't hold grudges, but I will never forget on draft night when I told Austin that Kyler Murray slotted in and my initial rankings is like QB 16, and Austin told me get a different process. Like he was not happy about that. Josh, I did my rankings and he moved up to 14. I don't know that I'm bought in, and I'm seeing a lot of really great stats about what Kyler Murray did in 2020 and what he did in 2021 and what he did pre-injury and this, that, and the other. But he is injured and he is a little bit older, and he does not have, when he was putting up those numbers, he had DeAndre Hopkins, AJ Green, Larry Fitzgerald for one of those seasons, Rondale Moore. Right now, it is Marvin Harrison and Trey McBride, and that is it. And I just don't know if it's going to benefit Kyler Murray as much as it's going to benefit these wide receivers.
Yeah, I think the thing that gets me with Kyler is that which Kyler are we getting, right? From a rushing perspective.
Exactly.
Because the first 2 years, he was over 1,300 combined rushing yards. He ran a lot. He had 15 touchdowns on the ground. Obviously, we know about the injuries from last year, or coming back from the injury last year, suffering the injury in 2022. But 2021, he took a huge step down from a rushing perspective. His attempts per game were down to 6.3. His yards per attempt were down to 4.8. Only had 5 touchdowns, barely over 400 yards in total rushing. Like that, we kind of want that like 500 is sort of like that rushing floor for quarterbacks for us, right? He hasn't had more than 3 touchdowns on the ground the last 2 years.
Yep.
Now, sure, maybe some of that's a product of, playing less games, but where he's at from a rushing standpoint, I mean, he was averaging about 38 yards per rush attempt in 2022, which again is still kind of down from where he was those first, like it was kind of like in between where he was the first 2 years, but it's not that 51.2 yards per game where he was at in 2020. Okay. So I think if he's somewhere above that like 40 range, I think that's really where we want him to be, because he brings 40 yards. That's a guaranteed 4-point floor, right? You throw in the occasional touchdown. So if he gives us, let's say 6 or 7 rushing touchdowns with 42 yards per game, that to me is a top 8 quarterback in fantasy, because we know what he can do with his arm.
And I'll give you that. The issue is there's 2 things that bother me about that. Is he's only crossed that 6 touchdown mark one time, and that was back in 2020. And I've been doing some of the research on the 2020 year of offense, and it was heads and tails better than any year of offense we have seen in the NFL, previous and since, on how many touchdowns were scored by every position. So I don't like looking at that 2020 offense. I just don't know if we're going to get that many rushing touchdowns. And then here's my other thing, Josh. When you look at the Arizona Cardinals as a team, and I understand Kyler has been hurt, but as a team, they have only thrown 35 touchdowns combined over the last 2 seasons. They have not crossed 20 touchdowns once. And obviously we hope for better things, but to get to 20 touchdowns, are Harrison and McBride both scoring 12? Because I think that's what's got to happen here.
Yeah, I mean, you're definitely going to see the ball being spread out a little bit. I have Harrison at 8 touchdowns. I have McBride at 5. I have the running backs combining for 3. So, like, I might be a little low on the touchdown side of things for Kyler, because I have him at 22 passing touchdowns. And like I said, I kind of, only project them out for, 16 versus the 17. Hey, Josh, I only have him at 23 total.
Guess how many touchdowns I have him projected for? This is weird, man. What a weird show.
Oh, we're thinking too much along the same lines. I don't like it.
Yeah, we've been doing.
Where's Joe? We need to start throwing verbal jabs. Exactly. But and that's kind of where I'm at. Like, I the wide receivers to me are very underwhelming. Like, we love to, to bring hotness with the Greg Dortch nicknames and all that stuff, but he's a Jag. You bring in Zay Jones, who's been productive, but if he was still really good, the Jags probably wouldn't move on from him. Michael Wilson, they drafted last year. We saw a little bit of pop from him. Maybe he's better as a 2 and he can grow into that role. That's true. Like, this isn't an offense that's going to target the wide receiver 2 100 times when you have a really quality tight end there. So, like, I only have the wide receiver 2, Michael Wilson, at 63 targets. There's not a lot to go around here. like to me, you're investing in either one or both of these running backs, Marvin Harrison or Trey McBride. And then, of course, Kyler. Like, that's where this offense fits. But I think that because they're still young, like McBride's going into year 3, Marvin Harrison, obviously year 1, Trey Benson year 1, James Conner probably on his way out.
Michael
yes,
Wilson
Kyler's
year
a veteran.
2, if you believe. So,
yeah, like Kyler's going into, he's the seasoned veteran on this team. But this is only his second year in this offense. He only played 8 games in this offense. So for all intents and purposes, he's a rookie in this system. So there's still a lot for him to grow into. So that's why I don't think that he's going to come in and throw 26, 27 touchdowns this year. But, 22, 23 for this offense might be on the lower side, but it's definitely an uptick when you consider where this offense has been over the last 2 years.
He meant 3 receiving touchdowns. I think you missed part of that conversation. We were talking about how Kyler spreading the ball out for passing touchdowns because we're worried about the amount of passing touchdowns. So, yeah, it's just 3 receiving touchdowns. We expect way more rushing touchdowns out of them, which, again, could benefit Kyler, but I haven't seen it since that 1 year where he scored 11. So I find that very, very interesting. Gator brings up that Call of Duty doesn't have a new game out yet, but every November that new game comes out. So that's not going to work out real well. And then I got to get him up here. This is not the Anthony Richardson show yet, but the roll says Drake May over Anthony Richardson. He's bringing the hot takes. The roll is going to be my guest on our mock draft show on Saturday. So tune in. It sounds like it's going to be a fun one. Also mentioned 60 subs away from getting super chats on his channel. Roll, drop it in the chat. Let's see if we can get you up some subscribers on today's show now that we have all these new people with us and we can get some of them heading over your way. Josh, let's finish up the Cardinals talking about their rookie running back, Trey Benson. And my biggest thing I want to address with Benson is how many touches do you think he can get in year 1?
So I have him right now projected at 131 touches when you combine rushing and reception. So it's going to be interesting because, again, it's going to mirror that Cleveland system. We saw Nick Chubb and Kareem Hunt coexist, right?
Yeah.
The 2 healthy seasons that Kareem Hunt was there with Nick Chubb, he had 123 or more carries in both of them and 198 in one of them, which was the year that Nick Chubb got hurt. So, and he topped 44 targets in each of those seasons also. So, like, there's going to be a very solid role for Trey Benson in this offense. Not to mention, James Conner's never played more than 15 games in a season.
Exactly.
So there's going to be games where Trey Benson is the RB1, right? It could be 2 games. It could be 5 games. It could be 7 games. We don't know. So there's going to be plenty of work for Trey Benson to get. And he was a guy that a lot of people had as their RB1 going into this class. I know we talked a little bit earlier about Jonathan Brooks, but there's room for Trey Benson to have a very significant role in this scheme. I don't love his current ADP on Underdog right now. It's RB28. It feels a little bit like rookie fever. But again, like if you think that ceiling is Kareem Hunt in Cleveland, I think that's right up there because Kareem Hunt had a top 12 season in Cleveland as the backup. So it's not unheard of, especially if he scores a ton of touchdowns.
Ratio points out that the Cowboys would kill for Benson. I would say the Cowboys should have killed for Benson. Probably Ezekiel Elliott just to make sure that they needed him because somebody needs to die there because I don't know what's going on with that running back room and how they passed on these running backs. But I remember Josh Jagger May had Trey Benson as his RB1 in this class when we talked about that. And I know
Gator too. He talked a lot about Benson on Mocking with the Stars on Monday night when they were doing all those rookie drafts. Benson was his RB1 too. So, like I said, there's plenty in this community that love Trey Benson. And you can say what you will about, oh, well, he's stuck behind James Conner. They're going to use both backs. James Conner is a very good running back. But when you look at the quality of running backs behind James Conner last year, it was a who's who of dog shit. Like, it was awful. So now you come in, you bring in a solidified RB2 that has that RB1. I can carry the load upside for those games that James Conner inevitably misses. There's room for, like, hey, this is a great 0 RB target, in my opinion. I think his ADP right now is a little too insulated for him to kind of to fit in that category.
It'll be interesting to see where it falls to in August when real drafts start. Not to say best ball drafts right now aren't real drafts. I just mean it's going to be interesting when you get more casual players in, because again, you're right. James Conner doesn't play 16 games. And you said, he could be good for 5 games. Let's not also forget where those 5 games are likely to be. It's likely to be the last 5 games of the season. And I think Trey Benson could be a championship fantasy running back by the time this is all said and done. Josh, let's finish up with the bets on the Arizona Cardinals. this is where one I wanted to talk about comes into play. So we have a little bit here when it comes to Marvin Harrison Jr. Again, not a lot of bets. I honestly think there are only Marvin Harrison Jr. bets right now. 1050 on the receiving yards. Robbie and I both go over. Josh, I have Marvin Harrison finishing the season with over 1,200 receiving yards. Where do you have him in your projections?
Right now, I have him at 1140. That could very easily change once I go through.
Still a good 90 yards over his over, though. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, he's going to be the top option as a rookie in this offense, and he's going to a situation where he has an established quarterback. There's no reason that he shouldn't blow past 1,050 yards.
Yeah, I agree. And then Josh, I'm going to throw a ratio up here. He says Arizona could be a sleeper. He's not going to lie. And you saw a little bit of a bet there for the Arizona Cardinals as well.
Hey, on the DraftKings Sportsbook, Arizona's plus 1,300 to win the division. Here's the fun thing. We talk about the Rams kind of being on an upswing, right? Like they bring in they get Stafford healthy. Puka Nacua is a revelation. Kieran Williams shooting out like a cannon out of the gate. He's now dealing with another foot injury.
Yeah.
Stafford is another year older. He's been hurt the last couple of years. The team is young. You don't know how young players are going to, continue to grow or crumble under pressure. San Francisco, Super Bowl hangover. Happened to the Eagles. Could very well happen to the Niners. Why can't they sneak in and make some waves, right? Like Jonathan Gannon, for all his faults, the defense played well in spots last year. He's got another year with his guys in the system. They bring in some key contributors. They still need some work at corner, I think, but you could say that about a lot of teams.
Yeah. According to Joe, there are no good corners.
There are no good corners, right? So if the offense can do and make that, like take that next step, like the second year in the system with Petsing, this could be a team that could sneak in and win this division. Like it's only a matter of time before San Francisco starts getting hurt like they had been and then crying foul because nothing is breaking their way. And, the Rams dealing with injuries because they're an older team. The Seahawks, I really have no idea what to make of the Seahawks, in all honesty. Like, I want to believe in them, and I think that offense is going to be really exciting. But if you told me that they only win 5 games next year, I would not be surprised.
Yeah.
So, why not? Plus 1,300?
I was going to say, this is way better than your Washington pick because I do like this. $1 wins me what? $13 here, 13 extra money. It's not the worst thing in the entire world. I will say my research took me a completely different way. I don't like any of these teams really. And so I was like, when I'm looking at my bets, I was like, what happens if I parlay all 3 of them to miss the playoffs? And that actually pays negative 141, which isn't quite a double up. But if I can pay $14 to win 10, I'll take it. I don't think these teams are going to win their division, Josh. So I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. So I went very negative and I placed that bet. I put $14.10 for all of them to miss the playoffs just to try to win an easy $10. See how that goes. I don't bet big, but I have fun with it. But I will say I might go back and look at some of these Arizona bets. Plus 1,300, and you make a compelling argument, and ratio brings up Aaron Donald also gone. That defense lost its heart with the Rams. So San Francisco is probably their primary competition. Joshua Hudson, that is a wrap for episode 1 of our Look Inside series. Thanks to Josh for carrying the show. Like I said, no guest this week, but you did great. You came with great research. Nice job, buddy.
Yeah, it's amazing what can happen when you're not working 50 hours in a week and actually have time to research for a podcast.
Yeah. If you guys enjoyed this episode, this is our show for the next 2.5 months before we lead into the summer of women of fantasy football, as we always do in August. We are going to be breaking down 3 teams every single week with some great guests. And we do this in article form as well. So next Wednesday, this show is going to be back. But every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 3 articles are going to drop on our website, 1 covering each team. So we had Josh's Diontae Johnson article drop on Monday. We just dropped our Terry McLaurin article from Renee this week. And then the Arizona Cardinals is going to be next week because of the mix-up. So we're going to see the Patriots article from our buddy Matt Record on Friday, and then you'll see Arizona next Monday, just because, again, we wanted to make sure Joe was going to be able to talk about his team. That moves us on to next week's episode, where we are going to talk about Joe's New England Patriots, the Los Angeles Chargers, which should be a fun one, and then the Giants, which brings me back to the lull of these early shows because nobody wants to talk about the Giants. But thankfully, we have Andrew Cooper from Fantasy Alarm with us, Josh. That's a great pull for a guest there.
And the man can talk, so he's going to make everything interesting. So I'm excited about it.
I think the saddest part about this is no great tight ends to talk about with any of these.
I know. I was looking at that too. Like, I'm going through it, I'm looking at our schedule, and I'm like, all right, where's one where at least 2 really good tight ends come in? And I'm like, I'm not waiting a month and a half to get Coop on the show. So.
Yeah. At least if Arizona was there, we could have heard Coop wax poetic about Trey McBride, but that's just not going to be it.
But you know what? I have a feeling he's going to have a lot of really good things to say about Hunter Henry.
And hopefully Theo Johnson, because we all know I love Theo Johnson. But I remember Coop pre-draft was not big on Theo Johnson. And actually Coop was big on Jaheim Bell, who also ended up in New England. So I'll be interested to see, does he see a usurp situation where Jaheim Bell can maybe take over that role? That's going to be fun to talk about next week. Guys, make sure you subscribe. We have got to 1,000 followers, but that is just one of the milestones we're looking for. Every subscriber helps us. We very much appreciate you guys. I don't know what the next goal is. I guess it's 1,100, but I can tell you it is going to be an action-packed summer here at Club Fantasy. After we finish our Look Inside series, we turn the show over to Women of Fantasy Football, Faith and Kelly, where they are going to have some of the best women in this industry on that show to talk to you guys about fantasy football, their journeys, sports jobs in general. It's going to be a very awesome show, not to mention it's all for charity. There's going to be donations. There's going to be charity auctions for jerseys and footballs and a ton of great stuff. This is going to be a great summer to be a part of Club Fantasy. Make sure you hit that subscribe button. Not to mention, we also go live 5 times a week. We have this show every single Wednesday. My mock draft is on Saturday. Gator J and Chris's mock draft is on Monday night. We have the Dynasty After Party every single Sunday. We have a best ball show now with Gator J and Stacey Perez on Tuesdays. And every Wednesday, we drop a golf show for you. We have you covered everywhere. And we have another best ball show with my co-host, Austin Mandolia, coming up later. You can't stop us going live. It's what we do here. It's going to be a great summer. Make sure you hit subscribe. Always remember, defense wins championships. Offense wins fantasy football, and we will see you next week with Andrew Cooper.